All right. Well, this will be a weird dispatch. We are recording this a couple hours after the Russians officially annexed those parts of Ukraine. No one else recognizes this as being valid. And the Russians are saying they're going to defend their new holdings with every weapon at their disposal. And there's been a lot of chatter of NATO countries publicly telling them don't go nuclear. And you put all these things together, plus a bunch of other things, and it kind of makes me wonder if they're going to go nuclear. I don't know if they are or not. But I'll say this: I think all of us need to be prepared, like kind of like psychologically, for the fact that they might. And that's not a prediction or anything because I don't know what's going to happen. But I think, like I'm always saying, our expectations are a problem. I think we need to have our expectations dialed in for the fact that things could be about to get really weird in Europe.
So I would note this, and that is after listening to that speech, I mean, obviously reading a translation of that speech from Putin on
Yeah, I
Friday.
didn't see it live. I read a translation
Yeah,
late.
a translation of it. Those are not the words of a man whom I trust to have a, a shared commitment to a shared reality. Like he is creating his own world a little bit. And that means I don't think that we can trust that he would behave as we would behave in his situation. I think he's operating on a different agenda and set of assumptions and operations. I am now personally, I'm not an expert. I'm in no position to guess this, but I am now resigned to the fact that it's a matter of when, not if. But I'm much more pessimistic than you are on some of these things. Just it's the nature of a speech. It's the fact that neither the Ukrainians, the West, and Russia is going to back down. They're not.
Yeah.
No one's bluffing here. So I don't see how this ends in anything other than a tactical nuke strike. But I could, I don't know. But I mean, what I want to ask you, because this is like nuclear war is your wheelhouse. So what does a tactical nuclear strike look like? I know we've talked about this a bit before in the line, but just so that people don't think I'm getting apocalyptic here. A tactical
Um.
nuclear strike is not you and me are going to be in our basements for 72 hours. That's not what that means.
Well, first of all, it's not 72 hours; it's 2 weeks. Um.
Fair, fair.
So, look,
Thanks for letting me know that, or I would have made a very crucial error.
a lot of the terminology is Cold War vintage stuff that most people don't think about anymore, and you can quibble with any of it. Like there's a lot of fuzzy terrain between a tactical nuclear weapon and a strategic nuclear weapon, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people would say a nuke is a nuke is a nuke. I don't agree with that. So a nuclear weapon on the high end can be something that can either completely destroy a city the size of Calgary or rip the heart out of a city the size of Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
We'd call that a strategic weapon. It is used for strategic purposes to materially weaken an enemy nation by destroying its population and its infrastructure and its economy.
Sure.
Tactical nuclear weapons are much, much smaller than that. And they can be very, very small, or they can go up to around the size of the Hiroshima bomb. And these are designed to be used against enemy military forces.
Sure.
And that could mean destroying a base, it could mean destroying a unit in the field. They can be used in air battles, shooting down enemy aircraft. They can be used against enemy warships. So they're still nuclear weapons, and they are vastly orders of magnitude more devastating than any other conventional weapon. But for instance, if you dropped a nuclear weapon, a tactical nuclear weapon on, for example, Pearson International Airport in Toronto, which is probably about 10 miles from me, I'd hear it and I'd see the flash and I
Mm-hmm.
would feel the shake and it might even rattle my windows, but I'd be fine. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what the fallout would do to me, but like, a tactical nuclear weapon will destroy everything within half a mile in kind of in a radius, so like a full mile. Now that again, that is orders of magnitude more powerful than any other weapon that exists. But that's a little itty bitty nuclear bomb because some of the big ones can kill whole cities.
And
So
also, let's put this in perspective. We're not seriously contemplating the idea that Putin's going to throw even a tactical nuclear bomb in North America. We're talking about tactical nuclear bombs toward Ukrainian
yeah,
targets specifically.
well, I mean, let's talk about that. I would say that there's four possible scenarios if he decides to use them at all, and he might not. But if he does, There's something called a demonstrative use, which is that the Russians use a nuclear weapon, but they could blow it up kind of anywhere. They could blow it up in the middle of a field. They could blow it up over the Black Sea. They could hit some tiny little military garrison. And the purpose is not actually to materially alter the military outcome of the war. It's to send a political message. I'm not kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I have nuked you and I'm willing to do it again. So it's to send a political message. The other possibility is what we could think of more as a broader tactical use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine itself, which is to actually use them for a military purpose. So a small number of weapons hitting military bases, logistics hubs, rail junctures, key bridges, and units in the field. And those bombs will destroy anything they hit. So we could wake up one morning and find out that some of Ukraine's military units no longer exist, some of its airfields no longer exist, and some of its logistics hubs no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
But if you use those bombs smartly and correctly, you might not kill a lot of civilians. Like you could, again, with a tactical nuclear bomb, you can hit a military target inside a city while leaving most of the city itself intact.
Mm-hmm.
Fallout and radiation is difficult. It depends a lot on factors like how high the altitude that the bomb explodes. The lower to the ground it is, the more immediate fallout it creates, because it irradiates more dust and soil and dirt and stuff. All that stuff gets sucked up in the air by the fireball because it's hot and hot air rises, and then it fallout. It just falls out of the sky. A nuclear weapon detonated at high altitude doesn't do that. It sets everything on fire below it, but it won't generate a ton of fallout. So I don't know what kind of radiation exposure we'd be looking at. It could range from catastrophic to minimal. So that would be the broader, kind of the second of four scenarios. Where things start to get scary is when we start thinking of Putin doing a mix of tactical and strategic. So again, totally speculative. He hits a series of military targets in Ukraine with tactical nuclear weapons, and he drops a big one on Kyiv. And I don't think that's likely. I think a lot would have to go wrong for us to get to the stage where he's destroying cities, but it's possible. And then that fourth level of escalation is the bad one. It is when things go very badly wrong, and we find ourselves in what the strategists called a general nuclear exchange, which is basically a nuclear world war. And I think that's very unlikely even now, but it's possible. And that's something
possible. And I would say about. If we were saying that this was had gone from a 0.01 to a 1% probability in February, we might be at a 2% probability of that now. It's still low, but the probabilities have now gone up. Of course, the other concern is even if we go into scenario 2, as you described, which I think is probably the most likely scenario, which is like limited tactical nukes against military targets in Ukraine in order to bolster Russian forces. Even if in that kind of scenario, how does NATO respond? Do we retaliate? Do we retaliate with conventional? Do we retaliate with nuclear? I mean, how we respond to all of this is, we broadly, is a real open question. I don't know.
Well, so that's how we could get from scenario 2 to scenario 4.
That's right. Yeah. So basically you and I are in a really bit of a pinch planning wise, because neither of us really wants to write this dispatch until we see how the next couple of hours go.
Yeah, well, dispatch blurb 1, Kyiv has been destroyed and a dozen nuclear warheads have gutted the Iranian military. Dispatch blurb 2, let's talk tax policy. It's this is not an easy thing to plan. The whole last week or so, I think, has been really interesting.
It's been a busy week news-wise.
Yeah,
must be said.
Yeah, but I think even more than that. So look, my mantra around here is our expectations are a problem. And what I think is happening for a lot of people right now is that a lot of people who had been adamant that nuclear weapons would not be used in this conflict are now starting to go, maybe they will be. Mm-hmm. And their previous expectations were a problem. So they're kind of psychologically getting caught up in what that would mean. For those of us, you and I, many others who thought they might be used in this conflict, we're moving from might to very likely could be, or even probable. And we're also having that catching up process. And I have, it's funny, I tell other people your expectations are a problem, but I would say this week, my expectations have been a problem. So
Hmm.
you are more pessimistic than I am on this one. I'm sort of in the zone of like, I don't know what's going to happen, but here's what worries me. If I was to write out purely intellectually what I think is going to happen, I think I would be expecting nuclear use.
Yeah.
But what I keep having are my expectations, and they're
Hmm.
telling me, nah, he won't do it. And I don't know if that's my saner judgment or if that's my normalcy bias.
I think it's your normalcy bias.
Could be.
Look, the type of language that Putin is using, he's calling the West satanic. I mean, there were some experts basically saying that that speech was as close as you get as an open call to hostility with the West broadly.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, it's interesting because I literally am writing a book on the Satanic Panic, and that looks at the history of Satanism and history of satanic conspiracies, particularly in the West. And it's very interesting because if you have accepted the idea that your enemy is satanic, is literally the most evil of evil, beholden to the evil one, there is no guardrail against your behavior anymore. There is no normalcy anymore. There is no, like, satanic is an interesting word. It literally means that we, the West, are beyond our control, operate in a sphere beyond our own control. We're completely beholden to the most evil forces allowed. And if that's who you genuinely see your enemy as, then what is not permitted? What
Yeah, you don't show
standards are
mercy
you
to Satan.
holding to? Right? Like, and this is something that we saw happen during the Satanic Panic. It's that when people sort of come to believe that they're people they disagree with, that they're quote unquote enemies, are beyond redemption through ordinary liberal means, you know, beyond talking to, um, that's when things go pear-shaped, right? Like that's when, because I mean, you can't pull people back from the line of that and say, okay, so we don't worship Satan though. Well, that's what a satanic person would say. Like, you know what I mean? It's I think he's gone. And it's just a question now of whether or not other people are going to allow him to stay in power or whether or not he needs to use nukes to stay in power. I'm not enough of an expert in Russia to make that guess. But
Um, you know what's interesting? So I had a talk earlier in the week with a buddy of mine
mhm.
who I think is currently going through a rapid reevaluation of his expectations. He believes Putin is inherently a rational actor and that he will make rational decisions. I don't know if he is. I suspect one's definition of reason tends to change if you feel a noose tightening around your throat. But I think for Putin, one of the concerns we have is rational actors can reach irrational decisions if
Conclusions.
their information is bad.
Well, and not only that, but you can be the people who were engaged in the Satanic Panic were rational actors. They were acting upon the information and the understanding of the world that they had. Their understanding of the world was deeply limited and flawed, and you know, sometimes in many cases, warped by a kind of religious bias, which Putin's understanding of the world seems to be warped here, at least in his outward public facing statements. So, like, it doesn't make someone irrational to say my enemies are satanic and I should therefore blow them up.
You know, there's an old joke. It doesn't really work anymore in the age of cell phones and text messaging and stuff. But the joke is that a guy goes on vacation and he asks his neighbor to look after his cat. And while he's on vacation, he gets a telegram from his neighbor. It's an old joke, a telegram. And the telegram says, "Your cat escaped, ran into traffic, and was killed. So sorry." And the guy gets back from his vacation and he chews out his neighbor and he says, "I'm not even angry at you that the cat got out, but what a terrible way for you to have dropped that on me. Why couldn't you build me up to it? Give me a chance to adjust. Send me a telegram that says, 'I'm so sorry, your cat's gone missing. We're looking for him.' And then the next day, send me a telegram that says, 'Your cat's on the roof. We're going to try and get it down.' And then the next day, send me a telegram that says, 'I'm so sorry, we couldn't save your cat.' Like, you should have like softened me up." The neighbor goes, "You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible about this." The next year, the guy goes on vacation again and he gets a telegram from his neighbor. and it says, "Your mother's on the roof." I- I've always liked that joke because people do need time to adjust to bad news.
Hmm.
And there's a degree of psychological bargaining and adjustment. And I think a lot of us are reevaluating our expectations this week. And I think you've talked about the speech Putin gave, and I agree with you. It's kind of unhinged, but I actually don't think it's the most interesting thing that happened this week. Everything has to be seen in its context. Over the last couple of days, starting with the Russian ambassador to America in Washington, he published an essay. It's kind of nuts. And you read it, and it's all blaming NATO, talking about how Russia would use nuclear weapons to defend itself, saying America doesn't take its nuclear bluster seriously and doesn't believe Russia means what it says. And other Russian diplomatic missions all over the world have said similar things. And I look at that and I see a coordinated communication strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at the Nord Stream pipelines exploding in the Baltic. And look, I haven't been deep diving in the area. I haven't done a forensic analysis. But I ask myself who benefits from that. And no one really does, except if the Russians are trying to build a case for a defensive war against NATO.
Which is obviously what they're doing with the annexation.
The annexations, these statements from their diplomats, a pipeline exploding, which they blame on NATO. Repeatedly warning that we're not just at war with Ukraine, we're at war with NATO backing Ukraine. We now have these annexations and saying we're defending ourselves. And you put all the and then Putin's speech on Friday, and you put all these things together, and what you start coming out with is a messaging plan.
Yeah.
And I think
it's a messaging plan that's preemptively defending the use of tactical nuclear warheads.
They pushed us into it. They made us do it.
They circled us. They continued coming after Russian territory. The colonial West is our real enemy. America dropped nuclear bombs. How come we can't drop a nuclear bomb? It's all there. It's right there. And this is why I'm further along this line than you are, because I'm just like, the way that they're setting this up is they're communicating in very clear terms to me what they intend to do.
They're communicating,
at least to me.
No, they're communicating exactly the way, like if you had told me Putin is going to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, imagine what the week leading up to that looks like. What I would describe to you looks a lot like the week we just had. Increasing bluster, threats that against the West, warning that Russia will defend itself, positioning itself as a victim that has no choice, everything. And that's why, even though I'm still stuck in this headspace where I'm like, maybe it's not going to happen, maybe it's not going to happen, I still think that might be my normalcy bias pulling me back rather than any actual rational assessment of what's happening. And I don't really know quite what to make of that, but here we are.
Well, and also I do think that I don't want people, especially listening to this podcast, to panic about this, because I mean, A, you and I have been wrong lots, and B, even if that happens, I don't think it's actually going to affect our lives that much. to be blunt, I mean, maybe the actual dispatch we should be writing here is the degree to which Canada has demonstrated itself to be utterly insulated from, almost a daily hit of news, international news. I mean, the pound's collapsed. Bank of England had to short up. Looks like the debt crisis in China is worsening. You had the Nord Stream pipeline blow up. Oh, what the hell else happened? Like 3 other things happened. Hurricane Ian.
I mean, Fiona hits at the Atlantic, and then Ian hits Florida. The British economy goes bust. The pipelines explode. Something we would normally be all over is infighting at the Toronto Star, which would normally.
Oh my God! Right? Yes.
The Greens cancel their leadership vote because they're too incompetent to pull it off. A series of polls come out showing that Poilievre's lead is widening. Yeah, I'm with you. Like, this has been a fascinating week in the news. But like I said, like our second and third dispatch items are going to read really weird if the first dispatch item is at 3 a.m. our time, Kyiv went up in a mushroom cloud.
Yeah. Right.
I think one of the things I will say is one of the feelings I've had this week, and it's purely a feeling, is that I had a pretty, you and I, you might remember this specific conversation. Early 2020, we were talking, is this Wuhan thing going to be a thing? And I told you, I don't know, but I'm acting as if it will be. So I'm making sure I can work fully from home. I had to go out and get a couple extra little widgets technologically. Um, am I, I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to make sure we got lots of food in the house. I'm going to go to the bank, get some cash out, all these basic things. And I didn't know if I was overreacting, but it was better to be prepared. So a couple of weeks later, all of a sudden, everybody's buying toilet paper, right? And I had a Costco thing of toilet paper in my house already. I felt that way this week again, where I don't know what's going to happen, but well, what was the headline on my column this week? Time to think the weird thoughts.
Yeah,
I'm
time to
thinking
think
the
the
weird
weird
thoughts.
thoughts. Yeah.
And I think, even if it's the second scenario I laid out, Putin lights off a bunch of tactical nukes in Ukraine, which would be
That to be clear is what I think is the most probable outcome here.
and
I don't.
it would be one of the worst days in human history.
Yeah.
Like the amount of devastation that would be unleashed would just be horrible, even in a relatively limited one-sided military exchange. Life will go on. And that's kind of what I find to be the interesting thing. And I'm not saying that in like a cheerful, oh, life will go on way. I mean, life will go on and we'll have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the kaboom, bunch of mushroom clouds go up in Ukraine. And I think people probably have kind of a Cold War leftover mentality of, oh, it's a big flash and it's all over. No, we're still going to be here, and we're going to have to figure out what we do that day.
Yeah.
Like if let's even go to scenario 3, right? Let's say Putin lights up half a dozen tactical nukes and he takes out Kyiv or Lviv or Odessa.
Mm-hmm.
You still got to go to work the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Still got to go grocery shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think we're going to have to start thinking about some of these scenarios.
The apocalypse is not the end; it's the revelation. I kind of want to flag that that column I wrote in 2020 yet again.
Yeah, well, or put it this way: the apocalypse will not be an event; it'll be a process.
Yeah.
And
well, the other interesting thing is I kind of have the similar feeling about climate change, which is a much different kind of catastrophic scenario because, of course, climate change isn't one event; it's a process. But even so, I mean, I don't think climate change gets us to the point of total collapse of all humanity. The world is unlivable. Climate change is a slow process by which it just becomes less and less and less, gradually less easy for us to live on the planet.
Yeah.
But we still go on. That's the thing. There's no like moment where the gases get released and we all die en masse. There's no blissful end. There's no meteor coming. Like we just go on. It just gets harder. That's what it is. So yeah, I mean expectations, right?
Expectations. And a fun thing to consider is that, well, not fun, actually horrifying. So a lot of people kind of our age and younger have probably never really thought about nuclear weapons at all. I'm a weirdo who grew up fascinated by them and did my MA in them. I've studied this stuff a lot. But I've always studied from the perspective of the Cold War, and I think it's worth pointing out to people who don't necessarily know this stuff this well. And I'm not trying to put a big smiley face on thought of nuclear war, but we actually have far fewer warheads than we used to. So it would be a very different kind of war. Like if we'd actually had a full exchange in the 1980s, I don't think we would have rendered the human race extinct, but I think we could have collapsed civilization. Like they completely collapsed civilization to basically back to the Dark Ages. I don't know if we could do that now. I suspect we probably could, especially if we caught a few bad breaks. But there's a lot fewer bombs, a lot fewer missiles. The nuclear forces are much smaller, and I think that's kind of why I was saying a few minutes ago, it's not an event; it's a process. A lot of us older than say 40 probably had nightmares of the sirens and the flash, and that's it. And that's not the way it would be. So.
Well, the other question in all of this is like, how much of an arsenal does Russia have left, and how much of it can it actually successfully shoot? I think that's a very open question, is my understanding.
I don't know. I don't have the number offhand, but it has somewhere probably around 1,500.
1,500. But like, how many of
1,500.
those could they actually successfully shoot? We've seen the last year have not given us,
Yeah.
shouldn't give us any particular rosy assumptions about Russian military competence or capacity, right?
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because have you seen Doctor Strangelove?
Mm-mm.
No, it's a dark comedy about nuclear war planning, and there's this great scene where one of the American generals is saying, "I'm not saying we won't get our hair mussed. We'll lose 20, 30 million people tops." Like it's like this very dark humor. We actually could have a full out exchange with the Russians and kind of be in a situation where a lot more of us are alive than we expected.
Mm.
Now what?
Yeah.
like what do we do now? And the thing how much can I say here? I have concerns about how
We have some
I
concerns.
have some preliminary
I have
concerns
some concerns.
about how prepared Western governments are. And, and I think the Americans still have within their government Cold War muscle memory. And I think the Americans, more than any of us, have people in their national security blob who think the weird thoughts that I do. I don't think there's many Canadians in Ottawa who think the weird thoughts. And I know that there would be plans at national defense and at probably public safety for some weird scenarios. But I get the feeling that even the people who write up these scenarios in Ottawa are thinking, this will never happen. And then some bureaucrat skims through. It's like, oh, good, we've updated the nuclear war plan, initials it, and then boom, right on a shelf. A pandemic was actually a really likely scenario by the standards of disaster planning. It was one of the ones we knew would absolutely happen eventually, and we weren't ready for it. So, how are we going to do reacting to something that 3 years ago, a year ago, would have seemed completely absurd?
Well, maybe it'll be fine, Matt. I
Well,
don't want to linger too long on this. I do think that we should hold off on writing this top of the dispatch until tomorrow, until we absolutely can't do it anymore, just because and like I said, I don't, if it is the scenario two situation, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but it could happen like in the next week. But still, I kind of want to hold off on doing that. So let's move on to like everything else in the news.
I'm
Do we
sorry.
want to talk?
I'm staring into the abyss.
Oh, okay, it's cool. Do you need another minute?
Okay, I think I'm good
Okay,
now.
we're good. We're good. We're
Um,
good. Okay, let's go.
what else do you
So,
want to? Like, and in other news,
and in other news,
how do
I
we
mean
pivot off of that?
the ownership situation at Torstar is hilarious.
I
It's, I
I've only
mean,
I've only looked a little bit at that. So that basically, there's two owners, and they're not playing
there's
nice.
two owners and they didn't have the foresight to like have a third breaking vote. Like, I'm just going to point this out. Like, I made a bit of a snarky remark because I couldn't help myself, and that is, these two owners who have owned Torstar for the last 2.5 years are now in such a dire state of dislike and disrepair. Their relationship is so dysfunctional that one of them has filed a court order to basically force the sale of all of Nordstar's assets, including the Toronto Star. And in the meantime, has said, the other owner can't fire a bunch of editorial staff, including one of our former colleagues, Anne Marie Owens. So that's interesting. What's more interesting to me is that two people who went in on a $60 million deal to buy all of these assets, firstly, didn't have a plan for what would happen if they disagreed about the vision of the company and how to dissolve that partnership in an amicable way, and didn't have the foresight to like appoint a third partner and maybe divide their company 47-47-6, that someone else would have like a deciding vote. Like, I don't know, our Substack did, like, just so that we're clear, our
We
Substack, we
we
literally
looped
were
in.
like,
We cut in a mutual friend who could function as a tie-breaking vote if you and I ever had a complete deadlock on an issue.
a complete deadlock on an issue, or a total breakdown or a total disagreement. And you and I have had like the shotgun plan. Like, how do we dissolve this company in an amicable fashion? Like, literally, we've put more thought into how we would dismantle the line and
Well, that's
Beethoven
cheerful.
like put into like their plans for the Toronto Star. So subscribe to us. Yes.
You know, the Star. I guess I should disclose here. I wrote for the Star a few weeks ago. I'm not a full time writer there, I think, but they asked me to write a piece for them, and I did. So just
Sure.
as a
I've
disclosure,
I've written for the Star recently as well.
yeah.
You go where the fish are, right?
So correct me if I'm wrong here, because again, I've seen the headlines, but I haven't read the coverage.
Okay.
Is this a scenario where one of them wants to build the business and the other one wants to just basically rape and pillage it for the
That
residual
that's
cash?
kind of what it sounds like. So
Okay.
there's how is it? Beethoven. I'm Paul Rivet. Um,
So Beethoven Rivet.
Bidove and Rivet are the two sort of like main owners, 50-50 owners of Nordstar Capital, by the sounds of it. And Nordstar Capital is kind of like the holding company that owns Torstar and Vertical Scope, and I think an online gaming company kind of thing, right?
Okay.
So fine, fair enough. So it sounds, according to Rivet's court filing, that Pidoves kind of went, for lack of a term, what's a non-offensive word to a term of saying this? Is like he got really into his role as a publisher and started to take it very, very seriously and
Okay.
didn't want to rape and pillage the Torstar, where Rivet was like, here's a business case,
Yeah.
so it sounds like there just was a difference fundamentally on the vision for the company, so to speak, with Bidove kind of standing up and saying, no, I don't want to do this. Rivet, ironically, was the one who put in his injunction a thing saying, I don't want you to, Bitove, to fire a bunch of editorial staff, including Ammo. So that's weird, right? Like, that's interesting. I don't know what to read into that, and it could be nothing. But yeah, and essentially that's the situation. So now it looks like there's going to have to be some kind of court mediated
Hmm.
dissolution of Nordstar, which will include the sale of Torstar. What is Torstar worth at this point? I don't think very
That's,
much.
I
Maybe
mean, now that I'm
10
writing for
million.
them a lot.
No, but I mean, if it were in the 10 to 15 million range, I wouldn't be surprised. But
See,
I don't
correct me if
think
I'm
it's
wrong. It was a few, how long have the new owners had it?
2.5 years. They've
So
literally been in business together as long as we have now.
I
Just
remember
funny.
I remember when the company was purchased. And by the way, this is not just the Toronto Star. This is Tor Star, which
Mhm.
has some other papers,
It
which is
has
part
some
of it.
other papers and other entities. It's not just the paper. That's
If
right.
I remember correctly, the company was purchased, like its purchase price was below its cash reserve on hand.
I don't know if it was cash reserve on hand, but it was like total assets, certainly.
I don't, I think, look, I
It
will
could
check this
you
and
could have
we'll
been
get
right.
it.
It could have been cash on hand.
And I think we'll have to check the dispatch. Like we'll check this. So listeners and viewers, indulge us as we fact check this. But I think it was cash reserves on hand. And the reason that sticks out for me is because I remember at the time talking with some other media types and going,
That's insane.
well, no, in a weird way, it kind of makes sense
Hmm.
that the value of a modern media legacy company, a legacy media company, is negative dollars. So a modern legacy company with 60 million bucks in the bank was like purchased for 58 million bucks.
Yeah.
Or like I don't remember the exact number, so I'll go look that up. I don't know. The Star has continued to invest. They have continued to spend money. They have continued to try to actually run a newspaper. They haven't contracted as much as some of the other papers in this country have,
No.
getting smaller and leaner all the time. The Star has tried to hold on, but that's interesting because now maybe the fact that they've been trying to hold on is the source of the dispute between the partners. I got to go read all this stuff. Like, sorry, I've been
Yeah.
reading nothing but like except nukes all week.
No,
So
no,
maybe I
no.
should go read this.
This is a real palate cleanser, let me assure you. Corporate drama is much more entertaining and nobody has bombs. At
Yeah,
least in
I
this
should not
country.
write this dispatch blurb though, because everything I write will just be in military metaphors. Like Bitov hit Rivet with a second strike. So my head's in a very specific place right now.
I will
You
take care of this one. But I don't know what there is for us to say. I mean, we haven't done any original reporting on this one. I think a lot of it's been reported out in other outlets already. Like I said, the only thing that really struck me is like there was less planning into the
Mm.
dissolution of this of this partnership than most typical marriages between wealthy people. Like most marriages will include a prenup. Like what are these men doing? I'm just sort of baffled by that, but I don't have any other really cogent observations to make.
Well, I mean, I was raised by a business guy, and one of my early life lessons is love and business is business. So
Mm.
I could be opening a business with my wife, and I would still have a catastrophe plan for the business in the
Right?
case of irreconcilable breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to plan for that possibility. I'm just kind of baffled by that. I'm baffled that both of these men should actually be really embarrassed that this is now a court matter. Like
Yeah.
that's embarrassing for them.
All right. Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, okay. I will go read some of that stuff, and then you can probably write it up, and then I'll read it for fact checking. The other thing that's happening this week that I thought was interesting was the British economy going all wonky. And
Yeah.
this is, I don't know enough about this. So I've been poking some of our other buddies and asking them if they want to write something about it. I don't know yet if any are going to take the bait because
Mm-hmm.
everybody's busy right now. But I just find it very interesting, right? Because with everything else we have in the world right now, having a G7 economy melting down would not be great.
I mean, it's perfect timing as far as I'm concerned. Let's just get everything off the table
Out
at
of the way.
once. Yeah.
Yeah. Hit Christmas with a clear slate because everything that could go
That's what I'm
wrong has
saying.
gone wrong.
Everything that could go wrong by Christmas, pull off the bandage, build back better.
2023 with a bang.
Gonna be great.
So I am poking around on that, seeing if anyone wants to whip a little blurb up for us on that front. But I don't have any takers yet. So if
It's so interesting that everything else has been so crazy that almost didn't last the news cycle for more than a day.
oh, the Queen died like 2 weeks ago, and who the hell remembers that now?
Nobody, I don't
Gone.
even remember. Like whatever.
Yeah, and then the other thing that just kind of jumped in, I mean, there's a couple of federal stories, and I've already mentioned one of them. The Green Party basically is so thoroughly melted down now they can't have a leadership race. Like they've actually had to, if I recall correctly, just based on a quick CBC article I read, the Green Party does not have the logistical ability in place to have a leadership vote. Because they've had a series of
Great
staff
sign.
departures, so that's great.
So let's stop pretending that they're a party and move on.
This is what I've been telling people for years. We pay the Greens too much attention. Every time they get any scrutiny, they wilt and implode. Like
Yep.
this is a high school clique that happens to have a couple of seats in Parliament. Like it's I don't know why I mean, no, I do know why. Elizabeth May was great at self promotion,
Yep.
and she was great at self promotion in a way that made people pay attention to her party.
She was great at promoting her brand as being like somebody who you really want in politics without no, she was great at promoting herself as a brand, as someone whom journalists idealized as the perfect politician,
Yeah, and then
without
she would talk
putting
about
much
Wi-Fi or something.
yeah, I mean, without putting much consideration into the fact that she had no demonstrable skills as a politician aside from her ability to self-promote
And well, I mean, and win a seat, and then
and
eventually
win a
win
seat.
a second
Sure.
seat, and then the
Yeah.
party just immediately goes into free fall. I mean,
Sure.
how seriously are we supposed to take a party that could not withstand the added pressure of one additional MP?
I,
Like it worked.
the Greens lost me forever with the Anime Paul stuff, and I'm not saying Anime Paul was perfect in her leadership either, but like, I was like, okay, you're just a pile of wingnuts. Moving on.
I think, yeah, no, I mean, I do think, it's funny. Some people I know, because there are smart Greens, there are like
Brilliant
smart
Greens.
people who
Yep.
are who identify with the Greens and they're smart. And it's just the thing is about them. I was saying them for years, and some of them would even agree with me that Elizabeth May filled that husk of a party with her own personality and sort of ambition and self promotion, but that's all it ever was.
Yep.
And she was savvy enough to gussy it up a bit and make it look like, oh, it's a nascent democratic movement and a country that is drifting ever more towards a multi-parliamentary democracy. It's like, no, it's not. It's just not. It was the vessel for her ambition and her ego and her genuine success as a self-promoter.
And I don't say that to be disparaging. I mean, nobody can criticize anyone for their ego on this show.
Not in our line of work, no. I mean, we get up and tell thousands of people every day what we think.
Yeah, like we're important or something.
Yeah, I think it's weird, but here we are.
Oops.
The other thing federally, other than the Greens being a permanent tire fire, is, and who cares this far out ahead of the next vote, but Polyev is doing well.
Doesn't surprise me.
His polls are rising. There was a poll a couple days ago that I kind of looked at and went, well, that's weird. There's a Main Street poll that had the Conservatives way out in front. Too high, as far as I could tell. It was a wild outlier to all the other recent polls.
Also Main Street, so
yeah. But then I saw Angus Reid a couple of days later, not as high, but the Conservatives are still way ahead.
So I mean, obviously, Polyev is enjoying a bit of a honeymoon period.
Or he, maybe it's a honeymoon, or maybe now that the Conservatives are done their stupid leadership factional stuff and the news is bad all the time, maybe Canadians are tuned out of the Liberals.
They're looking for someone who comes off as serious, which is definitely what the current Conservatives scream to me.
Yeah, serious government serious
government in waiting.
I think it was in June. It was before we took our summer break. You and I wrote about this. We just had the feeling that we had sort of seen peak Liberal and they were coming down. So, all right. So what? I'll do a federal medley. I'll recap both these things. You go figure out what's up with the Torstar. I will continue to see if I can find someone who wants to whip up a little economics thing for us.
Okay, and then we'll just do kind of like you start on nuclear situation, and then you throw it back to me, and we'll just kind of joint do that one.
What I'm going to do on the nukes is nothing.
Okay.
Overnight, I will start doing it tomorrow, and I just feel like I should repeat, just as a note of caution. I don't want anyone to panic, but I want everyone to pay attention.
Yeah. I don't think that we've had a dispatch here or a podcast here that will make anyone panic.
It's hard to talk, especially with people who have memories of the Cold War, where they're programmed to think that the button being pushed kills everybody everywhere. We live in an era of smaller, more precise nuclear systems, and I hope it doesn't happen. And it's very possible, even if Putin orders the button to be pushed, some bodyguard steps forth and puts a bullet in the back of his head. Like I wrote my column a few days ago, we have to think about the weird scenarios, and one of them could be civil collapse in Russia or instability in Moscow. The problem is that some of those scenarios also lead to nuclear conflict.
Yeah. Oops.
Life, I liked life more. I was joking about this on Twitter a few days ago, where I basically said,
3 years ago.
Well, 2019, I'd get up in the morning and I'd make my cup of Earl Grey and I'd be reading the papers and I'd be like, man, what am I going to write about today? Well, and Andrew Scheer, he said something dumb, or Doug Ford, tough labor negotiations with the teachers.
Oh, yeah.
I'll do my 800 words on that. And everybody online would be like, Gurney, you suck. You're a fucking asshole, or you're brilliant. You're the best journalist in the country. Like, the level of engagement was the same when the stories were like contract negotiations with Toronto's largest public workers union have dragged it through an overnight session, and now it's like, well, hopefully we can finish the plague before the nukes start flying. And that's 3 years.
And hopefully, the collapse of a G7 economy doesn't send like catastrophic economic ripples through an already damaged global situation. To say nothing of what's happening in China. Great, super. Like we're hoping that like plague, nuclear war, 2008 style collapse maybe this week, right? Also, can you feel bad for Liz Truss for a second? Like,
yes,
you killed the queen.
Yes, I can.
You've collapsed the economy. You're going to oversee a probable nuclear war. It's your first month on the job. Go.
We should probably. What would be funny to ask our readers to email us stories of their worst first day or week or month they ever had on the job.
First month on the job. Yeah.
Let's just for fun, let's put that in the dispatch. Challenge to readers. Email us your story that it shows us that you had a worse first day, week, or month on the job than the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Yeah. So we'll probably put that in next week's dispatch, assuming, of course, we're not all in
our basements.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll we'll go with that.
Do we need another staring into the abyss before we go?
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm good.
We're good. Yeah. Okay. Pack it up.
Oh, you and I will talk about this off air. We need to figure out what we're gonna do with the comment section. We took a 2-week break.
Has it been 2 weeks already?
Yeah, and
well, let's bring it back. Let's see how it goes, but let's bring it back with a like, we're watching you, and we're only going to open up comments on the dispatch for now.
All right, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yep, and then if they behave, we can maybe open it up on more pieces.
Like, I don't mean want to be patronizing to our beloved paid subscribers who pay for the privilege of commenting under our pieces, but like, my dudes,
it was getting insane.
It's getting insane.
Like, some of the stuff was legally actionable. We can't. We're not going to deal with that. Like, I will say though that even among our paying subscribers, something like 97% never comment.
Yeah.
So, and probably of the remaining 3%, I'd say probably 90% of those comment reasonably and rationally. Any comment section is a demonstration of a collective action problem. Yes. All you need is for everyone to play nicely together. But if one person decides to be a jackass, it doesn't matter what the others do, because the whole thing falls apart.
Well, and I think also we should just be very ruthless about banning people. Like, if you were posting stuff that is legally actionable, that is a perma ban off the bat. There's no 3 strikes here. Like, we don't have time to keep track of people that much.
All right. So assuming that things, we will reopen comments next week or on this dispatch.
Let's do it on this dispatch.
All right.
Let's see how it goes.
So we'll put a little blurb in there. We also just need, one of the things we need to do is that we can't have people responding with like one word to every single existing comment in the thread.
Stop it.
Because someone will come in and there'll be like a comment thread that has like 80 comments in this, and they will reply, yeah, good point, or no, I think you're wrong, to every single one of them. So an 80 comment thread becomes 160 comment thread.
Guys,
like that.
No, that is bad comment thread etiquette.
If we had better moderation tools,
yeah, I know.
If we could get Substack to give us either length limits on comments, daily maximum numbers of comments, or monetize comments where you can write as much as you want, as often as you want, but each one costs you $1.
Yep. I wouldn't care.
This problem would be solved.
I know. When I was back at the Post, that was one thing I proposed. I was like, charge people to leave a comment. It's an obvious thing to do.
I'll say this, our engagement numbers haven't suffered.
No, I know.
Like, I was curious to see if killing the comments for 2 weeks would actually in any way harm us. I think we had like 2 people unsubscribe because they desperately missed the comments.
Yep.
97% never comment in the first place.
That's true, but at the same time, I like the comment section, and when it was great, it was really good. I always checked the comments. I always found that it was really valuable. Like, when it was good, it was fantastic. So I don't want to get rid of it. I'm sort of pro comment, which I never thought I would be. But
I am anti comment, but I will play by your wishes.
All right.
I'm gonna go stare into the abyss again.
Cool.
All right. Well, okay. So you do Torstar, I'll do Federal Update. I don't really have anything to say about hurricanes. Like, they're bad.
Hurricanes are bad.
Yeah, hurricanes are bad.
I'm desperate to be one of the journalists who one day covers hurricanes, like in the rain jacket with like you can see the wind here in the back. Like, I just love weather. I just fucking love it. So I would love, like, if there's a major hurricane, for the line to fly me down to cover it, because I would just die. I would love it so much.
I am completely open to doing this, but we would have to talk to our insurance guy. I don't mean just in case you're killed, but I mean, I don't want our coverage policy voided because you do. So
hey, that's just us being responsible owners of a business, which apparently is too much to ask for some people in this country.
Yeah. Okay. We say that in the least legally actionable way, by the way, Torstar Corporation.
We love you.
All right. So we will go do our research on that. Thanks. Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
All right.
Duck and cover.